that taxing the rich is a very, very popular idea. My name is Representative Shaun Scott. I represent the 43rd Legislative District in the Washington State House of Representatives, and I am the first socialist to be elected to the state legislature in over 100 years, and I have been a proud DSA member since January the 4th, 2017.
People have been seeing scary images and videos of really violent state repression from the Trump administration. Do you expect this to be a large topic of conversation in the upcoming legislative session?
Well, I think some of the images that we have been seeing of illegal and immoral ICE raids should most certainly be a major topic of discussion in the upcoming Washington State legislative session, which starts in January 2026. However, it's also important for us to remember that Trump is doing exactly what he promised to do in office. He had a campaign that was bankrolled by many billionaires. He is now, in essence, funding dramatic rollbacks of health and human services in Washington State, rollbacks to Medicare to the tune of $40 billion in the next decade by implementing major tax breaks for billionaires in Washington, D.C. So at the same time that we need to be doing everything that we can to combat the social repression that we are seeing from the Trump regime, we can't lose sight of the economic repression as well. And it's going to require state lawmakers to step up to the plate and tax the ultra-wealthy to fund services that are at risk because of the Trump regime.
This past legislative session saw huge cuts to social services on both the federal and state level, even as inflation and the cost of housing continues to rise. What is the forecast for progressive state revenue this session? What do you see as the most viable?
Well, Washington State faced a $16 billion, B as in Bill Gates, budgetary shortfall in the most recent budgetary session. And state lawmakers had a choice to make, whether or not to balance the budget on the backs of working people, everyday people, higher education, public schools, or to tax the ultra-wealthy. The good news is that there was over $8 billion worth of new revenue that was passed. The worst news, however, is that a lot of that was regressive, and on top of that, there were over $7 billion worth of cuts that were made to childcare, to higher education, to other health and human services. And coming up in the January 2026 legislative session, we're going to be facing another $2 billion budgetary shortfall. So we're going to have an opportunity to do the right thing by working people in the state, by doing everything from closing corporate loopholes to implementing a wealth tax, to ending huge tax breaks for data centers in Washington State. And if we take that course of action, which I'm going to do everything in my power as a representative from the 43rd to make sure that we do, we're going to end up with a budget that I think more clearly reflects the values of working and everyday people in our state and the 43rd LD and in working people everywhere.
What are some ways to get involved with your local community?
Well, I've seen firsthand the impact that everyday people in our state and in our district can have on our public affairs when we get involved, when we get loud, when we get rowdy, when we show up to town halls and we make sure that lawmakers don't forget about the communities that place elected officials in office. Here in the 43rd LD, which includes Capitol Hill, Fremont, First Hill, the University District, I've heard a lot from students, I've heard a lot from retired public employees, a lot from current teachers and nurses who wonder why it is that we are getting Republican budgetary outcomes despite the fact that we have a Democrat-controlled state legislature. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to show up to town halls just like the Tax the Rich town hall that we're getting ready to have. We want to make sure that we hear from some of our austerity-minded state lawmakers hear from us about why austerity budgeting is not going to be acceptable in this upcoming legislative session. And when we can, we want to make sure that working people come down to Olympia so that state reps that are down there for weeks on end, only talking to one another, perhaps only talking to corporate lobbyists, make sure that they hear from people who have the most to gain from a more just budget that emerges, hopefully, from the 2026 legislative session. Well, what I'm really hoping to see here at the Tax the Rich Town Hall here in the 43rd Legislative District is, everyday people in the 43rd reminding people who are in power, but also perhaps as importantly, reminding ourselves that taxing the rich is a very, very popular idea. I mean, if Tax the Rich were a political candidate, they would probably be the most popular one in the state, even more popular than some of the elected officials that are reluctant to tax the rich. So we want to remind each other that this is popular. Funding basic services in public schools and higher ed and health services in Washington State is more important than ever with some of the things that we're seeing from the federal level. And this is going to be a real show of force and a way of building momentum as we get ready for the state legislative session coming up in January.